Hello and welcome back to the DXP track here at Acquia Engage. Now that we've looked at how to identify, rather, how the identity revolution is changing the world and pushing brands to first party data strategies around the world, it's important for us to take a look at the flip side of experience and see how content, products, recommendations all come together and how we actually surface these experiences we're making and how they're actually composed and presented to every individual. If this is your first time joining our track, welcome to Free Your Content, a composable approach to success. It's a fireside chat. My name is Alex Del Canto, Director of Product Marketing here at Acquia. I'm elated to be joined by Johan Bostrom, co-founder and chief product officer at InRiver, a fantastic partner of Acquia as well as Wyden, who recently joined our family here. Johan, care to share a few words about yourself for the group?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me, Alex. Yeah, my name is Johan Bostrom, originally Swedish, but I've spent my last 7 years in Chicago and North America. And I'm the Chief Product Officer and co-founder of InRiver, which is a company working within the product information management space.
Excellent. And welcome again, Johan. So to get started here, I think we've both seen quite a bit of evolution in the market when it comes to what a great experience truly is. And as we've seen digital transformation accelerate, enterprises really need to keep up with this pace of change without sacrificing things like their time to market or the overall quality of the digital experiences that they're providing to their customers. And typically we've seen large companies with large portfolios working across a number of channels and applications, multiple sites across multiple geos and multiple locations, really an unprecedented volume. And that content, all that plethora of content, really needs to be tailored to and segmented to audiences across these vast digital estates, but it also needs to retain things like brand consistency, remain in compliance, surface the appropriate products that are actually available in certain regions or available at certain times of the year. And I think on one hand, we've really seen monoliths who kind of prescribe taxonomies and layouts, and they typically require hide code approaches when it comes to trying to create a truly unique experience to a brand. And on the other side, Johan, I think we've also seen the rise of mock or the headless stack, which is very flexible, as we all know, but it also requires a very high degree of code, lots of people with lots of expertise that make it very difficult for many organizations to successfully onboard, right? And I think these are challenges that are more relevant than ever when we talk about product experiences themselves. Because you go to any digital property these days, and I can guarantee you that any one of us in this room knows exactly what we're going to find, right? You're going to find a grid or some multiple forms of grids, some form of folder hierarchy. So this is obviously not a great experience, Johan, for the end consumer. No brands really aren't standing out. Is there a new standard that we should start to expect from the market? How are brands adapting to these hierarchies, these experiences that they're putting out around their catalog?
Well, they react in many different ways, and of course, as a software vendor, we also need to lead that work and to help them to become really enabled in that ecosystem that we're talking about. So, in my speech at Pinpoint that we had last week, I spoke about what you mentioned, the static taxonomies and the static way of dealing with hierarchies that actually is hiding products away from the end consumer or the buyer instead of actually helping them and guiding them to find the things that they are looking for. So guiding them, becoming more interactive with how you serve up the navigation, how you serve up search, and actually really focus on the search results as well is important. And that they aren't static is super important because we are all different. The seller is a sender of information. The consumer or the buyer is a receiver of said information, and they are rarely looking at the data in the same way. So when you have one single static taxonomy that you're showing to all customers, all buyers, and all endpoints, you're going to fail because you're going to create a rift between you and your buyer. And it also goes to like an Amazon or a Walmart that needs the data in a specific way that have already told you what the category is, and you need to adapt to that, regardless if you categorize it like that or not. Jeff Bezos probably won't listen to your to your arguments. So there's many reasons for being more flexible when it comes to how you expose the data. And when you look at that from a composable with a composable approach, the data can have a structure until it's needed. It needs to be exposed to each customer in a unique way, not only taking their persona into account, but actually trying to figure out their intent, so that not only do you guide them with the better navigation and the better search, but that you're actually exposing the product detail pages in a way that actually lifts up what they're interested in to the top of the page, so they don't have to scroll or have to click around to get the answers that they need. Repeat customers are different than new customers. They are interested in different things. So we need to be able to adapt. The data model needs to adapt. The data that we produce needs to increase in volume, because if we're going to cater to many different persons, not personas, we're going to have more content. And needs to be more granular and in the composable ecosystem readily available in real time, so that it isn't a batch job running next week, because that train left the station a long time ago. Unfortunately, a lot of software packages still work like that, but it shouldn't happen like that today. It shouldn't work like that today.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's a fantastic point that you raised, because looking back at the origins of PIM, right, this is really kind of like what a CDP is to customer data, but really for product data, right? We were looking at which products are performant, not just what information or what metadata is attached to them, but like what are we actually selling? Where are we selling that? What should we prioritize in our merchandising? And I think the extraction of that data across the ecosystem, particularly as organizations start to build out more modern applications using the capabilities that they need in order to fulfill their own use cases, is really quite interesting, because there's a number of steps that every business has had to take traditionally when working across the PIM to actually get the products on the site. And I think part of these taxonomies that we're talking about really aren't even founded in the product information itself. It's really a taxonomy that has been applied or forced upon us by some of the other tools in the ecosystem that people use. And I think the reason for that really is the way that most PIMs have been architected, being not real time, being focused around batch. Um, how is moving towards real time changing the game for In-River and its clients to deliver these great experiences?
Well, I mean, technically, you need to be able to answer in real time. You need to have the ability to actually expose the data so that it can be consumed in real time. But that's sort of the technical foundation that we provide. It is also an organizational thing. It's not prudent to work in the same way as we did before. We need to measure the value of our content and the effectiveness of it, so that we know that we're actually producing the right stuff. Because we have customers with over 3,000 attributes per SKU. I bet you that many of those aren't interesting to the customer or consumer. But if you don't know if you need 1 or 100 or 1,000, if you don't know what images convert, if you don't know how customers are searching for your products and be able to add keywords and metadata to help them navigate and help them find, you're not going to really be successful. So getting feedback data from the channels, both from third-party channels like in Amazon or Walmart, but also from your own sites, your brand websites running Groupal, you need to get feedback from those sites, so you know that what you are doing is actually serving the customer to buy, to increase the revenue. Or in many cases, when you have, especially in B2B scenarios, where you have an aftermarket, it's super important to guide them to find it, to expose the right data in the right way in the PDP, so that we remove all the friction in that buying journey. It's a little bit different when we look at a B2C shopper that you want to inspire to buy something. Then you have to expose it in a different way. It can be the same product that goes out as a spare part, as an accessory, and as something that is sold to a consumer at the same time. Uh, and they all need different navigations, different metadata, and different images and different videos and all that. So in order to do that and not produce too much and focus our efforts on the right things so that we know the next best action, that is really where we are heading as a company. And InRiver is laser focused on providing that feedback into the PIM process so that we can iteratively work basically 24/7 with improving our message to the market and see to that we actually drive revenue and keep customers happy.
Yeah, absolutely. And just thinking back to the opening session that we had on the track just a few sessions ago, Johan, we gave a great example of an amateur runner. I myself am embarking on my own running journey. And one of our joint customers, New Balance, between White and In River, is a great example of that I like to use of, you know, when somebody walks into a store, like you know exactly what is being sold on Amazon. You know which shoes are more popular for specific types of runners, like those that are embarking on a journey to try to run their first marathon. They're amateurs. Some might be more discount oriented, some might be less discount oriented and want the latest and greatest product. But whenever you walk into the store, specifically because we can all do this online especially, but it's also important to have that information be ported back to the endpoints, whether it's the store rep, the call center, and make sure that that information is consistent so that they have line of sight into what's popular, which products they should actually recommend based on the information that is suited for the ultimate objective of the end customer. And this is a great unification of strategies here because you know who you are serving, you know what products are most appropriate for them, and you know the path of least resistance to actually get them to convert. If you have a pair of shoes from last year in the stock unit, you're going to want to offer them up to the more discount oriented shopper versus next year's pair because those shoes are taking up space from your inventory. Same thing when you go on the site, right? You don't want to have to scroll through hundreds of pages of running shoes. You would just want to be served up the right content, your training guides, all of the information you need to get started, and ultimately have the most appropriate pair of shoes right there for Alex or Johan as a new runner to actually get you going and following those training guides and completing challenges so that one day maybe you will uh, get to the point where you finish your marathon and ultimately buy your next pair of shoes from them when you are successful or when you have a new need for them. So I think that's incredibly compelling, Johan. And I think the only way that rather brands can make these experiences for consumers is through these low-code scenarios, right? In order to actually create these applications, to create these product experiences, both at the catalog level all the way down to the PDP, where we're kind of orchestrating and reorganizing and optimizing the PDP itself to make sure that the most relevant story is presented to every end consumer and also in a way that is on brand and governed, um, is truly through low code solutions that natively integrate plug and play services, much like InRiver, as well as some of our other joint partners, to deliver great experiences. If brands aren't able to test and iterate very quickly and actually build out these experiences, I think it's hard pressed for anyone to imagine that they're able to, get to such a granular level of product experience at the end of the day than they would be using traditional methods. Um, I don't know what you think about that.
No, but you're right. Our game is the content itself, right? So we want to measure in all engagement points, bring that data back so that we are actually seeing to that the right content gets produced and then gets exposed to all the endpoints that need it in real time. But we hand over the baton to Drupal, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the content will be exposed just because we have produced it and that we have exposed it. It needs to be there in the templates and it needs to be there on the site. And that needs work. You can't just do that automatically. You need to design it. You need to get that content into the template so it gets exposed in the right way to the right consumer. That needs low code solutions because it doesn't matter if we could do this at the blink of an eye and it takes 18 months and a total redesign of the whole front end solution to get there. because then our flexibility is pointless. In Rivers, flexibility is completely useless. We need solutions like Drupal and others to seamlessly make this happen, preferably with low code, because otherwise it will be too complex, take too long time, and you can't experiment. And I think that's also key to this. Feedback is great, data is great. We can do a lot of magic with the data and the feedback loops and machine learning and so forth. But there's a limit to what we can do without affecting the layout of how it's presented. We can only produce the best possible content, but it is presented in a context of a website. And that needs to be experimented with, measured as well. And you need to do that 24/7, just like you work with your content. You got to constantly update the way your site behaves. And then low code is the only way to go, as I can see it.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more, Johan. Thank you so much for joining us. And for the rest of the group, be sure to stay tuned for our next session with Spriker, where we're actually going to explore how you can intelligently scale and expand your product catalogs through marketplaces and onboard new products so you can focus on high margin and compelling products that further your bottom line. Thank you again, Johan, for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Alex.